They used to whisper your name in the dark. Not with love, not with fear, but with a kind of sick anticipation, as if they could sense your spirit waking up. As if they knew something you didn't, that the moment you remembered who you were, it would be too late for them. You didn't always feel powerful. In fact, for most of your life, you felt vulnerable, attacked in the quiet moments, betrayed when you trusted, targeted when you were just trying to live in peace. You didn't understand why certain people hated you on sight, or why the air around some rooms grew heavy the moment you walked in. But something has shifted. If you're honest with yourself, you can feel it. The fear you used to carry, the weight, the silence, the spiritual anxiety. It's different now. The shadows that once crept into your dreams don't have the same grip on you anymore. The demons that used to mock you, tempt you, torment you, they're still watching. But now, they're watching from farther away. They're not strong enough anymore. Not because they stopped trying, but because you've changed. You went through hell and didn't break. You cried in secret and still showed up in the world with grace. You were surrounded by snakes and somehow didn't become venomous. And most terrifying of all, you learned. You learned how to hear that inner voice. You learned how to sit in the storm without losing your peace. You learned to walk alone without losing your mind. And now, the demons, both the ones in this world and the ones from beyond it, can't figure you out. You were supposed to fall. You were designed to break under the pressure they sent. And yet here you are. They made you lonely, but they couldn't make you bitter. They took your loved ones, but they couldn't take your light. They stirred confusion, but they couldn't touch your clarity. Because here's the truth, one that they hoped you'd never understand. The moment you align with your divine calling, they lose all legal access. You are not who you used to be. You're not surviving anymore. You're ascending. You're not reacting. You're commanding. You're not begging the darkness to leave. You're watching it flee without a word. Because now, your presence is dangerous. Now your silence is thunder. Now your silence is thunder. They carry fire. You might not have noticed, but the attacks have grown desperate. The dreams feel more intense. The people around you are revealing themselves quicker. That's not because you're under attack, it's because they're losing control. You're not easy to manipulate anymore. You're not falling for the same tricks. You can spot a counterfeit spirit from a mile away. And that's terrifying to them. See? You were once a prisoner of your own compassion. You wanted to fix everyone. You stayed in places that drained you just to keep others comfortable. You listened when you should have walked away. But those days are over. That version of you, the one they could toy with, lie to, wear down, is gone. Now, you guard your peace like a weapon. Now, you pray with fire instead of fear. Now, you don't just speak light, you embody it. And that makes you a threat. Not to people, not to systems, but to every dark spirit that thought it had dominion of your destiny. They didn't expect you to survive. They didn't expect you to rise in the middle of the ashes. They didn't expect you to get stronger with every storm. But that's what chosen ones do. We bleed and still bless. We fall and still rise. We get betrayed and still love, because our strength doesn't come from this world. You're not being protected now because you're perfect. You're being protected because your mission matters. Because what you carry must be delivered. And because you've proven you won't be corrupted by what they tried to bury you in. The demons know this now. They know you're no longer easy prey. They know the lies that used to work don't land anymore. They know the pain they sent only made you sharper. They know the loneliness only made you closer to God. And they know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that your steps are being ordered. So they whisper still, but the whispers no longer haunt you. They watch still, but they no longer walk beside you. And they try still, but the gates they used to slip through have been sealed, not by your effort alone, but by the authority you've stepped into. That divine authority, it's not for show. It shakes realms, it shifts bloodlines, it breaks cycles. This is why the battle got worse right before your breakthrough. This is why you almost gave up right before you got clarity. This is why it felt like everything was going wrong, when in reality, everything was being rearranged in your favor. You're not cursed. You're not broken. You're becoming. And now that you see it, now that you feel that quiet strength within, you'll never be the same. Walk boldly, chosen one. They know what you carry now, and the demons. They're no longer strong enough to harm you, because what's inside you was sent to rule over them. You didn't ask for this battle, and yet, the moment you took your first breath, the war began. You noticed it early, even if you couldn't name it. The strange tension in rooms you walked into, the way some people seemed almost triggered just by your silence. You learned quickly, your presence alone stirs things, not because of what you say, but because of what you carry. And what you carry isn't light in the poetic sense. No, it's fire. Purifying, disruptive, divine. You didn't know then that you were chosen. You just knew you were different, and not in a way people celebrated, in a way that made you lonely, misunderstood, watched. There were moments when you doubted yourself, when you asked, why does everything around me feel like resistance? Why do people either cling to me or try to tear me down? But the truth is, the moment you were marked spiritually chosen to carry out something greater, the enemy knew. That's why the attacks came early, not in obvious ways, but in patterns that were almost surgical. The people who were supposed to love you the most turned cold, distant, sometimes cruel. The friendships you built shattered without explanation. You kept experiencing loss after loss, relationships, jobs, opportunities, as if something didn't want you to ever get comfortable. But this wasn't random, this was strategy, because demons don't waste energy on people with no purpose. They go after those who carry key spiritual ones, the ones who are gatekeepers, the ones who shift atmospheres just by standing still, the ones whose lineage threatens darkness, the ones like you. You see, what lives inside you isn't weak. It's not confused. It doesn't second-guess itself. It's divine fire wrapped in human skin, and demons recognize it, even when you don't. That's why you've always felt off in certain rooms, why you'd walk into environments and suddenly feel tension that no one else noticed, because your presence disrupted strongholds that had been sitting dormant, undisturbed for years. What you carry confronts what they hide. That's why you never fit in. That's why you kept getting spiritually attacked for no reason. That's why people would betray you when you showed them nothing but loyalty. They were responding to something they couldn't see with their eyes, but felt in their spirits. You weren't being rejected by people. You were being opposed by the darkness within them. But here's what they didn't know, and what even you didn't fully realize until now. You can't curse what's been consecrated. Yes, they tried to delay you. Yes, they tried to break you. But here's the truth, the enemy hates more than anything. You were made to endure, and not just endure, but transform through every trial. You didn't just survive the fire, you became the flame. And now, after all the storms, all the losses, all the confusion, something has shifted. They can feel it, the very spirits that tormented. You are no longer circling above your life, they're backing away. Not because they've changed, but because you have. You've stopped running from who you are. You've stopped minimizing your authority just to keep others comfortable. You've stopped doubting the voice inside you that says, you were made for more. And now, the demons that used to mock you in the dark, they tremble. Because you've come into agreement with heaven. You've aligned your identity with your assignment. And that makes you untouchable, not invincible. Not perfect, but protected. You don't fight like you used to. You don't entertain distractions. You don't fall for every temptation that whispers comfort into your weakness. You see it for what it is. Now strategy to delay the inevitable. You'll rise, and make no mistake, you're rising, not because you've forced your way forward, but because you've surrendered. You've allowed the breaking, the silence, the wilderness to shape you. That's where your real authority was forged. Not on stages, not in applause, but in hidden places, when no one was watching but heaven. That's what hell is terrified of. They're not afraid of your voice. They're afraid of your alignment, because alignment births access, and access unlocks dominion. And now your dominion isn't potential anymore, it's active. You can feel it in your bones. The clarity, the weight, the certainty. You no longer ask for permission to be who you were created to be. You no longer shrink when people misunderstand you. You no longer dim your light for those who've chosen to remain in darkness. And as you rise, the ones who mocked your struggle, they go silent. The ones who whispered about your downfall now watch you with awe. But it's not personal, it's spiritual. You weren't just chosen to shine. You were chosen to break chains. You were chosen to set captives free just by standing in your truth. You were chosen to walk into rooms and destroy spiritual atmospheres with peace, with discernment, with divine clarity. So don't expect comfort, expect resistance. Because every time you level up, the demonic realm scrambles to contain what can't be contained. But their time is up. They used to come for you in dreams. Now they retreat. They used to orchestrate betrayal after betrayal. Now they're stuck, watching you thrive in spite of it. You've crossed a line, one that cannot be uncrossed. And now you're not just protected, you're armed. Every scar you carry is now a weapon. Every loss is now a lesson. Every season of silence now speaks with thunderous authority. This is what terrifies them, that you know now, that you see, that you understand the truth. They never had power over you, only the power you gave them through fear, through doubt, through silence. But that version of you, the silent one, the unsure one, the hidden one, that version died. You buried them in the wilderness, and what came out was something holy, something fearless, something chosen. And as you walk forward into your destiny, into your legacy, the very forces that once laughed at your weakness now bow to your authority. But what's coming next? Even they won't be able to stop it, because you've only just begun, and the deeper truth still waits to be revealed. You wake up differently now, not just because your sleep is deeper, not just because your spirit feels lighter, but because something invisible has lifted. A cloud, a curse, a heaviness you didn't even realize you'd been carrying for years. There's clarity in your eyes. Now clarity that didn't come easy. You paid for it, in tears, in silence, in lonely nights when you asked heaven, why me? Why this life? Why does it feel like the world is allowed to rest while I'm constantly in a battle I didn't choose? You asked those questions in the dark, but now the dark doesn't answer back, because the enemy knows. You know, it's almost funny how scared they are now, how quiet they've become. For so long, they twisted your mind with fear. lies in your spirit, and called them truth. You weren't just fighting enemies on the outside. You were fighting the voice inside your own head that said, "You're too broken, you're too much, you'll always be alone." And for a while, you believed it. Because when the attacks kept coming, you assumed the pain was proof that you were cursed. But now you see what was really happening. You weren't cursed. You were carved by fire, by betrayal, by spiritual resistance. God was making space inside you, stretching your soul to carry something larger than your understanding. You weren't being punished. You were being prepared. That's why it hurt so much. You were being excavated. Every wound, strategic, every loss sacred, every delay, divine, because what dwells in you now, it doesn't come cheap. It's the kind of wisdom that makes demons nervous. The kind of discernment that sees straight through charm and false light. The kind of authority that doesn't need a microphone to shake the room. You walk in silence, but realms shift when you move. And the most terrifying thing about your glow now, you don't even notice it, because you're not performing. You're not trying to impress, to prove, to convince. You've been crushed enough times to realize your authenticity is the weapon. Your survival is the sermon. Your scars are scrolls, written in spirit. People used to laugh at your sensitivity, called you too emotional, said you felt too deeply. But that was your gift all along. Your sensitivity was never weakness, it was sight. You picked up on things others missed. You walked into a room and immediately sensed the truth underneath the words, the energy beneath the smiles. That wasn't paranoia, that was divine intel. The enemy tried to make you hate your sensitivity because it was your superpower. Now you use it like a blade, not to hurt but to reveal. You've become something they cannot categorize. Too deep for shallow minds, too real for fake ones, too awake for the ones still asleep. And so, they distance themselves. You thought it was rejection. It was protection, because what you're stepping into now requires peace, not popularity. You're not here to fit in. You're here to disrupt. That's why you've always felt like you didn't belong. Why you kept walking away from places that drained you. Why your soul would scream when your environment was out of alignment. You're not just sensitive to people, you're sensitive to purpose. And the moment something misaligns with your calling, you feel it. That used to feel like a burden, now it's a compass. And this is why demons have backed off. Not because they've given up, but because they've been reassigned. You're no longer in the same ring. What used to torment, you can't even reach you anymore. The spirits that once whispered in your ear now watch from a distance as your light scorches the places they used to inhabit. Your body has become a temple. They can't enter, not because you're perfect, but because you're aligned. Do you feel that stillness in your chest? That's not just peace, that's dominion. It's not just that you're no longer afraid, it's that fear no longer recognizes you, because you're not who you were, and you'll never be them again. The version of you that tolerated chaos just to feel connection, gone. The version of you that stayed quiet so others wouldn't feel convicted, buried. The version of you that kept begging to be chosen, seen, understood, redeemed. You don't need their validation anymore. You walk with the knowing now, a deep, divine knowing that no one gave to you and no one can take. It came through fire, through isolation, through watching everyone else get blessed while you were stuck in the wilderness. But even in that wilderness, you bloomed. They didn't see it, but heaven did. You whispered prayers through broken teeth. You sowed tears into the earth when you had nothing else to give. And now the harvest is here. Not just externally, internally. You've become the kind of person who cannot be shaken. The kind who walks into a storm and makes it sit still. The kind who dreams of new realities and then births them through sheer obedience. You're dangerous now, not to people but to darkness. And the thing is, you're not even trying to be. You're just being you. But that you is the very thing the enemy spent years trying to kill. They tried to turn you bitter, tried to make you hate, tried to make you cold, numb, cynical, because if they couldn't destroy your life, they wanted to destroy your love. But you didn't let them, even when it hurt, you loved anyway. Even when they left, you blessed anyway. Even when it broke you, you rebuilt anyway. And now heaven moves when you do. Not because you're perfect, but because you're available. And that's what darkness can't stand. They can no longer harm you, because you're no longer hiding. You've stepped into the light fully, unapologetically, and now even your shadow carries power, because it's no longer you who walks, it's what dwells within you, and they know it. The shift wasn't loud. It never is. You didn't wake up to fanfare. There was no lightning in the sky, no heavenly choir announcing, "You've arrived." No. The shift came quietly, like a whisper in the soul, like a door creaking open inside you that had been locked for years, and you stepped through it almost without realizing it. That's the thing about healing at a soul level. You often don't notice it until you're standing in the middle of what used to break you. You look around, and suddenly, you're calm. Where once you would have panicked, you now breathe slowly. Where once their silence would have made you question your worth, you now walk away without explanation. You don't crave chaos anymore. You don't chase what drains you, and the voices, the ones that used to scream in your mind, the ones that mocked you in your lowest moments, they're fading. Not because they've given up, but because they've lost jurisdiction. They were assigned to an old version of you, and that version no longer exists. You've outgrown them. This is the part of the story no one talks about. The part after the suffering, after the fire, after the heartbreaks and spiritual beatdowns. When the dust finally settles, and you look around and realize you're still standing, stronger, quieter, wiser, and more terrifying to the darkness than ever before, because now you've figured out the truth. It was never about destroying you. It was about delaying your awakening, because once a chosen one wakes up once, they remember who they are and what they carry. It's over for the enemy, and you're fully awake now. There's no going back. You walk differently, not because of pride, but because of presence. You've made peace with solitude. You no longer see loneliness as a curse, but as a call, a divine invitation to learn yourself outside the noise. And in that silence, something ancient stirred inside you. Not your ego, your essence. The part of you that came here with an assignment. The part of you that knew this life would be hard, but said yes anyway. The part of you that remembers what the world forgot. You carry something eternal. You always have. That's why you've been hated without reason. Why certain people couldn't stand to be around you, even when you showed them nothing but love. Your spirit irritated what was dormant in them. Your light revealed their shadows. Your purity exposed their performance. And some of them were demons, in disguise. Let that sink in. Some of the people who entered your life weren't just toxic. They were hosts, portals, vessels carrying darkness drawn to your light, not because they admired it, but because they were sent to dim it, and you welcomed them, because your heart is wired to see the best in everyone. But they saw you as prey, not because you were weak, but because you were raw, unguarded, open, pure. That's the most dangerous kind of light there is. You don't wear masks, you don't manipulate, you don't play games. You show up fully, and that terrified them, because you weren't easy to control. You couldn't be seduced by status. You couldn't be bought with compliments or bent by shame. You weren't perfect, but you were real. And in a world addicted to fake, that made you a threat, so they tried to break you. Not all at once, but little by little, they chipped away at your confidence with backhanded compliments. They drained your energy with fake support. They twisted your love into obligation, making you feel guilty for having boundaries. But here's the thing about chosen ones. You can't manipulate someone who has nothing to prove. You can't destroy someone who's already been broken and rebuilt by God. You can't shame someone who's made peace with their shadows. So yes, they tried. But the very things they used to harm you became the bricks of your inner temple. They didn't realize they were building your altar. Every betrayal an offering, every loss a sacrifice, every tear holy water. And now, when you walk, you carry more than just your past. You carry authority, because you didn't just survive, you alchemized. You turned rejection into redirection. You turned heartbreak into healing. You turned isolation into insight. And you didn't do it by forcing or faking. You did it by surrendering, by falling apart and letting heaven rebuild you, piece by piece. You've become something they can't label, too soulful for the secular dot, too awakened for the religious dot, too loving for the bitter, too grounded for the fake, spiritual. You walk a path few understand, because it's not a path, it's a calling, and it's yours alone. Others will try to imitate it. They'll borrow your language, mimic your style, try to replicate your energy. But it won't work, because they didn't go through the fire. They didn't sit in the silence. They didn't face the demons of 3 a.m. and choose to forgive instead of curse. They didn't hold their tongue when they had every right to clap back. They didn't walk away when everything in them wanted to stay and prove their worth. They didn't carry the pain quietly, praying for strength instead of revenge. But you did, and that is why you're different. Now, not better, different, set apart, sacred, and darkness knows it. That's why it leaves you alone now. Not because it's gone, but because it recognizes who you are. You're no longer the target, you're the threat. And every step you take from this point on will ripple through realms. Because you've crossed over, you've made peace with the pain, you've integrated the lessons, you've reclaimed your light dot, and now your presence is your protection. Because what's inside you, it's not just power, it's holy, and it terrifies the darkness. They don't approach you the way they used to, not because the darkness isn't still watching, it is. But now it hesitates. Now it second guesses itself. Now it sends scouts. Instead of armies, whispers, instead of storms. Because you, chosen one, have become something else entirely. You've stepped into the realm of unshakable presence, into spiritual maturity, into your divine seat of authority. And they know it, the ones who used to mock you. Now they fall silent when you enter the room. The ones who once drained your energy, now they find they can't reach you at all. It's not because you're hiding, it's because your vibration is now beyond their grasp. You didn't run away. You rose, and when you rise, certain things simply can't breathe in your air. It's like standing at the top of a mountain. There's less oxygen the higher you go. And some spirits, some people, some attachments were only built to survive at sea level. You tried to carry them up with you, didn't you? You tried to bring everyone along. You believed that love could lift them, but some of them weren't just passengers. They were weights, and you learned the hard way that not everyone wants to be free. Some people are addicted to their chains. Some are loyal to their demons. And some, well, some were never supposed to be in your story at all. They were just lessons. Painful, necessary, divine lessons. And now that they're gone, now that the door has closed, you feel something you hadn't felt in a long, long time. Peace. It's quiet in your spirit. Not empty, just still, like the air right before dawn. Like the hush that settles before something sacred begins. Because that's exactly what's happening. You're not just in a new chapter, you're on a new frequency. A spiritual elevation. An elevation always brings exposure. You see more clearly now, patterns, cycles, traps. You used to fall for them because they wore a mask, kindness, romance, success. Now you see beneath the illusion. Now you hear the tone behind the words. Now you trust the energy, not the performance. That's a terrifying thing for the enemy, because chosen ones who see cannot be manipulated. You're not impressed by titles anymore. You're not moved by empty gestures. You don't beg to be chosen. You don't argue to be understood. You don't shrink to be accepted. Instead, you've learned the sacred art of walking away, not from weakness, but from wisdom. You understand now, what doesn't feed your soul isn't worth keeping. You're done with the loops, done with the karmic relationships, done with the spiritual warfare disguised as friendship. Because the old you fought battles out of fear, but the new you win with silence. And that silence, oh, it screams in the spirit realm. It declares that you are no longer available for attack. Not because you became invincible, but because you became aligned. You stopped trying to prove your worth and instead embodied it. You stopped chasing love and instead became it. You stopped trying to escape the darkness and instead learned how to carry light inside it. And now, the demons. They know that you've returned to yourself. And nothing terrifies them more than someone who remembers who they are. Because when you remember who you are, you also remember what you're not. You're not broken. You're not a victim. You're not cursed. You're not alone. You're not too much. You're not a mistake. You never were. All those years, the rejection, the abandonment, the betrayal, they weren't proof that you were unworthy. They were proof that you were dangerous. Dangerous to every system that profits off of self-doubt. Dangerous to every fake person wearing spiritual costumes. Dangerous to every agenda that needs you small, scared, and silent, but not anymore. You've stopped apologizing for your presence. You've stopped explaining your vision to people without eyes to see. You've stopped overgiving to those who only take. And you've stopped waiting for permission to walk in your anointing. You're not here to fit in. You're here to dismantle, to disrupt, to disturb the darkness. That's why the attacks were so relentless. Because your presence isn't neutral, it's catalytic. When you show up, things shift. When you speak, truth pierces. When you pray, atmospheres bend. When you rest, realms respond. When you believe, chains break. That's why the demons trembled. They knew what was coming long before you. Did they saw the signs before you ever picked up on them? The light in your eyes as a child, The hunger in your spirit, even when you didn't know what for. The way you kept surviving things that should have taken you out. They watched you walk through hell with nothing but faith in your bones and hope in your breath. And they panicked, because they realized you couldn't be bought, you couldn't be broken, and you wouldn't be silenced. And now you don't just carry light, you are light, you radiate it, not from a place of ego, but from a place of remembrance. You remember the nights you cried alone on the floor. You remember the days you begged for a sign. You remember how close you were to giving up, but something in you, something ancient, something divine refused to die. That was your spirit. That was your calling. That was your origin, chosen. Ones aren't made, they're revealed. And this is the season of your revealing. No longer hidden, no longer caged, no longer watered down to make others comfortable. You walk in truth, now unfiltered, unapologetic, unstoppable. The demons, they still whisper, but now they whisper from a distance, because they know one truth: you're not afraid of them anymore. And even more terrifying, they're afraid of you. You didn't just survive, you transformed. There was a time when you cried out for rescue, when you begged the skies for mercy, asking why the battles never ceased, why people turned cold, why love seemed like a punishment instead of a blessing. You were convinced the war would never end, but something changed, not outside of you. Within, you stopped waiting to be saved and started becoming the savior you were looking for. The shift was subtle at first. A new thought here, a deeper breath there, a refusal to keep chasing things that hurt you, a quiet decision to finally look in the mirror and stop apologizing for what stared back. You didn't know it then, but that was your ascension. That was when the war began to turn. Because the moment a chosen one accepts their identity, truly owns it, without shame or doubt, the chains begin to snap. The illusions begin to dissolve. The power begins to surge back through their bones, their voice, their presence, and the darkness. It panics because it counted on your ignorance. It needed you to keep doubting yourself. It needed you to stay busy with distractions, with people who drained you, with dreams that didn't belong to you, but you stopped playing along. You unplugged from the matrix of lies. You let go of needing to be understood. You let go of performing for love. You let go of chasing things that were never meant for your soul, and you did the bravest thing a spiritual warrior can do. You faced yourself. That's what ended the demons. Hold on you, not an exorcism, not a spell, not some dramatic miracle, but the quiet, daily courage to sit with your wounds and heal them. You looked at the pain and didn't flinch. You sat with the rage and let it speak. You let the tears fall until they stopped needing permission. You let yourself break so that you could finally be rebuilt, not in the image of your trauma, not in the expectations of society, but in the divine blueprint that was written in your spirit before you ever arrived on this earth. And when you started living from that blueprint, that holy, sovereign, electric truth, everything changed. The attacks slowed down, not because you became perfect, but because you became anchored, rooted in something no weapon could pierce, centered in something no lie could shake, grounded in something no loss could steal. You became untouchable, not untouchable as in arrogant or above others, but untouchable in the spirit realm. Because even when the enemy whispers now, it's like static. You hear it, but it doesn't move you. The voices that once paralyzed you now sound distant, dull, powerless, because now you recognize your own and your voice. It's divine, it carries frequency, it carries legacy, it carries truth. You speak now, not to defend yourself, not to prove anything, but to release vibration, to disrupt illusions, to awaken the sleepers. You move through spaces now with reverence, not for the space, but for the authority you bring into it. Every step is intentional, every word is measured, every silence is sacred, because you know who walks with you, and the demons. They still circle, they still test, but they don't touch, because your light is no longer flickering, it's roaring, and it burns through falsehood, like fire through dry leaves. You don't need to raise your voice, your presence alone declares your rank in the spirit. You've become the type of person darkness avoids, and others sense it too. You've noticed, haven't you, how people stare longer, how they hesitate before lying to you, how they can't stay in your energy unless they're walking in truth. You didn't ask for that, but it comes with the territory. The higher your frequency, the more you become a mirror, and not everyone can face what they see in that mirror. You're not cold, you're clarity, and clarity is uncomfortable, but it's also healing. You didn't just conquer your demons, you outgrew them. They simply can't breathe in the environment you now walk in. Their weapons no longer work here. Fear doesn't seduce you anymore. Lack doesn't fool you anymore. Rejection doesn't define you anymore, because now you understand something deep, something ancient. You were never fighting demons to begin with. You were fighting yourself, your own unworthiness, your own silence, your own refusal to see how powerful you've always been. And once you turned inward and claimed yourself, the war ended. Not because the darkness gave up, but because you did. You gave up the self-betrayal. You gave up the shame. You gave up the desperate need to be loved by people who couldn't even love themselves. You gave up trying to be normal when you were made to be holy. And when you gave all that up, you gained everything. You gained freedom, you gained vision, you gained your anointing, and now you walk differently. Now you dream differently. Now you love differently, without attachment, without fear, without compromise. Your light doesn't beg, it doesn't chase, it simply shines. And if someone can't stand that glow, they were never meant to walk beside it. You know this now, and that knowing, that unapologetic, radiant knowing, is what makes you unstoppable. The demons can't reach you, not because you're hiding, but because you've become light incarnate. And light cannot be defeated, it only expands, so rise. Chosen one, rise without fear. Walk without apology, shine without shrinking, because the war is over, and your next season, it's not survival, it's reign. If this message stirred something deep within you, it's because your spirit recognizes the truth. You are not here by accident. You are not weak, broken, or forgotten. You are a chosen one, handpicked, battle-tested, and divinely equipped for something greater. So don't scroll past this moment. Breathe it in. Let it sink into your bones. Then share this message with someone else who needs it. Subscribe if you haven't already, not for numbers, but because this space is a sanctuary for souls like yours. And in the comments, tell me, what battle did you survive that made you unshakable? You're not alone anymore. This is your awakening.